I'm David Leven, Associate Professor of Architecture at the School of Constructed Environments here at Parsons and partner of the architecture firm LEVENBETTS. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone here tonight to Parsons and to the Architectural League of New York's first lecture in the fall Current Works series, a lecture by Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal of the Paris architecture firm Lacaton Vassal. Anne and Jean-Philippe succinctly explain that their international practice focuses on public buildings, housing, and urban planning, and in their work they modestly state that they prioritize generosity, economy, and human occupation. But I would add that they also foreground inhabitants' rights to light and air and pleasurable space, as well as innovative design. The Architectural League's Current Work series presents lectures by leading figures in the worlds of architecture, urbanism, design, and art. And this fall includes lectures by James Kieran and Stephen Timberlake, Zhang Ke, and Deborah Burke. The list of speakers, both past and current, can be viewed on the League's website, archleague.org. The League's programs are supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of Governor Andrew M. Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, and the National Endowment for the Arts. League programs are additionally made possible by ongoing support of League members. Thanks is due this evening to the Dean of the School of Constructed Environments, Robert Kirkbride, for making this event possible, and to the League for bringing Anne and Jean-Philippe here for this talk tonight. And before I tell you briefly about Anne and Jean-Philippe's credentials, I'd like to put in a plug for a housing symposium that Andy Bernheimer, sitting in the front row here, and I are hosting in the Kellen Auditorium here at Parsons on October 12th and 13th, called Housing, Left, Right, and Center. The symposium will bring together architects from across the country who are committed to bringing high levels of design to the creation of affordable, dignified housing. Anne Lacaton studied architecture at the School of Architecture in Bordeaux and received her diploma in urban planning at the University of Bordeaux. She has been a visiting professor at the University of Madrid in housing since 2007 and has also taught at such schools as the École Polytechnique in Lausanne, the University of Florida, the State University of New York in Buffalo, Harvard Graduate School of Design, and the ETH in Zurich. Jean-Philippe also studied architecture in Bordeaux and worked as an urban planner in Niger, West Africa. He has taught at the Universität der Kunst in Berlin since 2012 and has been a visiting professor at the Technical University in Delft, the Peter Behrens School of Architecture in Dusseldorf, and the École Polytechnique as well in Lausanne, among others. Anne and Jean-Philippe's work has been recognized in the form of numerous awards, a list too long to recite, but includes the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Triennale of Lisbon in 2016, the Gold Medal from the Académie d'Architecture in Paris in 2016, and the Living Places Award from the Simone and Mies van der Rohe Foundation, also in 2016. Their work has also been published widely. Again, too many publications to list, including monographs by such prestigious publications as El Croquis in 2015, the Japanese publication A+U in 2012, and 3 monographs by the Barcelona-based publication 2G. In a series of terms that they call attitude, Anne and Jean-Philippe chart a course for action for their practice. They state that, quote, "The architecture will be direct, useful, precise, economic, free, joyful, poetic, and cosmopolitan," unquote. This statement and their work on such important housing projects as the Tour Bois-le Pretre and Cité du Grand Parc Bordeaux have served as touchstones in the housing studio that Andy Bernheimer and I have taught here at Parsons for the past 5 years. our studio, most often focused on the issues of affordable, dignified housing in the extensive portfolio of the New York City Housing Authority, has found inspiration in the lines of inquiry in Anne and Jean-Philippe's work that prioritizes the reuse and rethinking of existing, well-functioning buildings, of the design of dignified housing, and of design as a vehicle through which to address pressing social concerns. Aside from the fabulous expanded skin projects of Tourbois-le-Pretre and Cité du Grand Parc, one of my favorite projects of Anne and Jean-Philippe's is the Contemporary Art Center in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais region in Dunkirk. The building, and I hope that they will present it tonight, happens to not be housing, but extends their approach of the reuse of existing structures and creates the reuse of existing structures to contemporary public art programs, The project doubles an existing former shipbuilding workshop and creates and integrates an open, glowing, flexible mirror of its forebear, aligning with Anne and Jean-Philippe's mission to, quote, generate the city based on the addition of acts of precision, unquote, and, quote, after should always be better than before, unquote. These are also their words from their practice's course of action, which is quite impressive. So for this incredible body of work, this approach to architecture as both a social and a design-based art, for providing our housing studio with excellent precedents to learn from, and for coming to talk to us tonight, we thank you. After Anne and Jean-Philippe's presentation, we look forward to a discussion moderated by the Architectural League's Executive Director, Rosalie Genevro. Please join me in welcoming Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's my second time here at for the Architectural League. The first one was a very long time ago, more than maybe 15 years or something like that. And thank you for your very nice introduction. So we are very pleased and happy to present our ideas and our work that we are doing together since many years. And to start the presentation, just and present it in general our ideas, some words. Buildings are beautiful when people feel well in them, when the light inside is beautiful and the air is pleasant, when the exchange with the outside seems easy and gentle, and when uses and sensations are unexpected, far beyond any aesthetic and formal determination, and far beyond the rules, standards, and programs. The freedom of use, the capacity of space, the flexibility, to give importance and place to people and uses, to appropriation, are the important qualities we aim in designing the projects. We think important today to design an architecture that challenges conventional answers, that is free from constraints, and that is based on constructional intelligence, good sense and creativity, generosity and freedom. A place which is open to freedom of use, to appropriation and improvisation. To achieve these goals, our design approach is based on some major principles. Generosity of space, extra space, double space, in order to facilitate multiplicity of uses and appropriation. This is our idea of luxury, therefore redefined in terms of generosity, freedom of use, and pleasure. The use of efficient systems of construction, like open structure, prefabricated structures, which generate efficiently high capacity volumes and grounds, economical, which allows to build larger, the same costs and fast build, what we are looking for in designing projects, this extra space that we are looking for. The economy is also important, to spend less and better. Economy is a key point. On the contrary of being a constraint, economy allows positive maximization of budget, allows making more for the same budget, allows to reach for what is essential, to set priorities. Spending less and better is sustainable. A bioclimatic concept, which means a maximum use of the natural resources of climate, the sun, light, ventilation, for natural comfort and energy saving. We use especially spaces like winter gardens, which are not only climatic space, but also a space of use in addition of the space of inhabiting. Bioclimatic space endow the user's responsibility through simple gesture. The importance and the value of the existing, the reuse, transformation, to reinvent from the existing is for us the opportunity for the sustainable development of the cities. Never create constraint of use, to give place for people and uses, to allow the user's creativity. A process of designing from the inside out. We always start the design from the interior to think the project at the position of the user moving from a space to another. We design architecture as an addition of space, of atmospheres, of relations. And then the dialogue and participation to allow the discussion and adjustment to fit with program and expectations and to involve users' training and responsibility. Since the beginning, our design approach has been supported by these principles with the idea that it's necessary to return to the simple, to the fundamental, to the essential. The concept of inhabiting is for us fundamental in architecture. Inhabiting refers to the pleasure, to generosity and freedom of occupying a space beyond the functional. Inhabiting gives place to people and to uses. A dwelling should have the same facilities as a villa is something very important in designing housing. So what means same facility as a villa? This is compared to the situation of the standard housing, which is always a very small space, like here the standard that we have in Europe for a dwelling for 2 bedrooms, 60 to 65. We think that the living space should have additional private spaces like winter gardens, terraces, balconies, and we aim to design as much extra space as program space at the minimum plus 50% of additional space. Then dwelling as a villa is also about the fluidity and the mobility. In a standard house, there is always one way to go from one room to another one. The extra space allows to extend mobility and freedom of use. All the rooms should have large doors opening to outside to give a facility to move not only from the interior but also from the exterior space to a room to another room. It's what makes for us the quality of living in a villa. Then the use of open structure instead of building with very rigid bearing walls. We like to use the principle of open structure built with floors, large span, that allow to free the facades, only a few columns which allow the flexibility, the adaptability, And it's also a very economical construction because we can use also standard prefabricated structure. So this allows most of the time to build for a house, for housing, at the same cost, twice more with such structures. Then the climate and energy saving. Instead of using the principle of insulation, we prefer to create this insulation through an intermediate space, a temperate intermediate space that is created by the principle of winter gardens. And that summarize all this idea of fluidity, mobility, openness, facility of move, which for us characterize a villa. And there's also interesting efficiency in terms of passive energy system, and at the same time it creates this extra space for use. So that was building like a villa, building a house, dwelling like a villa was our intention when we designed a long time ago our first house. This is we built it something like 1992. And our aim for this family was to break the standard and to provide the family with a generous and pleasant space to live in spite of the small budget. For the same budget, they could expect a small house of 60 square meters, 70 square meters. And our goal was to double this surface for living compared to the standard and to create an extra space as big as a traditional space. So we were also involved in designing a bioclimatic house, which would take maximum benefit of the natural elements, especially the sun and natural ventilation. And we use for that very simple system of construction, as well as we have been inspired by the technology of the agricultural greenhouses to create such a space oriented on east that is a very efficient space to create a good climate compared to the climate outside, but also this very interesting volume connected to the house to extend the living room. So we use the same, we worked with the same ideas for this social housing program that we built in 2005 and for 14 rented dwellings. This was part of a much bigger project of, with 4 other architects, and the commission was to reinvent in the middle of this worker city, which was built in the middle of the 19th century, to reinvent the idea of contemporary social housing. So we were free to propose any idea, but the only condition and the only requirement of the owner was that we work with a budget which is subsidized by the government for building social housing. It means something like 75,000 euros, something like $80,000 to build a house, dwelling for a family of 2 or 3 to 4 persons. So here again, we tried to see how it was possible to build larger without expanding the budget. And we used here especially the technology of greenhouses like this space, which we had really studied carefully, and we observed that it was not only a very nice space, but very clever and very intelligent in the way to manage the natural climate with a very great precision because growing flowers for the market or vegetable has a high importance and a high value for the farmers. So they must be able to control in great exactitude the climate inside. So we propose to use this technology in addition to concrete open structure, and to build those two levels, the ground floor, which is covered by a big concrete platform with only a few columns to support it, prefabricated structure, and on top 3 rows of greenhouses, exactly the same that we can find on the countryside. So that's a system, a constructing system, provided the biggest volume that we could do on the place at the maximum of the limit of the construction and the allowed height. And then inside, we built with this structure like a very big loft. And after the work was out to divide it in 14 houses. And this is the final result. With these two different levels, the ground floor and the first floor. So the constructing system, which is simple, efficient, and very economical, but provides also interesting space, because the efficiency must be given to the service of a nice living space. So that's allowed to create these two different atmosphere and condition of space, the ground floor and the first floor under the greenhouses, that was occupied by some wooden insulated boxes to extend the living space. And then we decided that every dwelling should have both conditions of space, of ground floor and first floor, and that gave this division of the plan, of the big volume that we have created, with every time, every dwelling has 2 levels. Sometimes it's big on ground floor and small on first floor, and the neighbor is the opposite. And we just determine a dimension for the facade of the living room, which should be around 6 meters wide and 3 meters for the bedrooms. So in terms of representation, that was the representation of what could be one dwelling with a ground floor era and the first floor space under the greenhouses. And then we discussed with the owner. It was a very important discussion about the relationship between the rent and the surface of the dwelling, because normally the rent is determined in function of the rent. At the moment, we were providing in the same budget twice more square meters. It was important that the rent should not be increased twice time more, because if not, it could not be any more social housing. So that was an interesting discussion, but the owner agreed very fast that if we built the project for the same cost, he will not change the rent, and he will rent the 130 square meters at the same cost, at the same rent as the 70 square meters. So that's one of the dwelling in with the garage, which is also like a room that could be transformed very fast. And the first floor, which is a large living room connected with a large, with no partitions, and the partitions have been made by the inhabitants themselves. And this large winter garden, which is connected to the living room. And the dwelling, also 4 bedroom dwellings with 187 square meters instead of 100 square meters of the standard. And again, the same cost of construction and the same rent. So this is this dwelling. So the ground floor with 2 bedrooms, and the first floor with a large living room of 60 square meters, which has an extra space of another 60 square meters with this winter garden. So just a few pictures for that. The owner was very happy with the result, and as well as the inhabitants. And then we did a second project with the same owner, which is a public social housing company. But in this case, it was a more dense conditions with more 5 levels. And it was interesting to see how we could develop this idea of extending the space, making dwellings as a villa in a more dense situation. And we arrived to make the same, it's not the same plan, it's not the same organization, but we arrived to make also in this condition dwellings like villas with also a very large surface, much twice bigger than standard.
This question of extending the space, this question of inhabiting, can be repeated for all programs. In fact, we inhabit the city. So we start from our bathroom, our bedroom, our living room, but then it happens in the street, in the public space, in the libraries, in the schools of architectures. Inhabiting, because we pass a lot of time in these spaces, so this question of pleasure of inhabiting is extremely important. So here in Nantes, the new School of Architecture takes place in the center of the city, in the island, which was a former harbor, former industrial space, and we are lucky to have this possibility for the school to be there. So here again, we were thinking that the School of Architecture should create double space, unprogrammed space, and the relations to the outside. So precisely the proximity of the river. What is a School of Architecture? We are thinking that the School of Architecture was the biggest office of architecture in the city. The place where you have all the energy of the student, all the knowledge of the professors, all the information in the archives, all the energy of the diploma presentations. And for that, a bookshelf that could be open for the inhabitants, a space where you could invite some other schools for workshops, a space where you can have some art exhibitions, a space where you can have some representation of theater, a place where you can have concerts, a place of culture, a place of debate, a place of discussion about all what concerns the city inside the school, and how the school can participate to this. So it's not only a School of Architecture, it is a platform of discussion about culture inside the city. So for that also, it means that the space has to be extended. Not only the program, but also what can be considered around. Space for invitation, collaboration, exhibitions, events, music, etc., workshops, etc. So a platform of discussion. And we were thinking that in this old place where the harbor was, in fact, the first project could have been a sort of industrial building, or that could have been done perhaps 50 years before. So we try to imagine this building could have been there before. And in fact, it is this idea to extend the space. The budget for the School of Architecture for a program of 10,000 square meters was about 16 million euros. So the question for us, it was not only to make 10,000 square meters, but to provide 20,000 square meters for the school, and including the outside space, 30,000 square meters of floor for creating this capacity of this platform. So the building is extremely efficient, extremely economic in order to create exactly these dimensions, this capacity in the same budget. So for that, we create a sort of first building, a sort of industrial building with three different levels. The first one 9 meters high from the ground floor, second one 7 meters higher, and the third one, which is also the roof, 7 meters higher. Each of these floors has a capacity of 1 ton by square meter, so much higher than what is normally demanded for the program. And here it is a natural ground of the city, which is highly compacted in order to have a different nature than the artificial floors above. A ramp, a sort of street, which is sometimes between 8 meters to 5 meters large, gives the possibility for pedestrians, for bikes, but also for cars to go from the ground floor to the first level, to the second level, and then to the roof, considered as a sort of large agora. So a very high, robust system with a grid of 10 meters by 10 meters, using only component systems of standardized elements, columns, beams, and floors, with an extremely fast system of construction, nearly 300 square meters by day, which makes this construction extremely efficient, extremely robust, but also very economic. All the space of the parcel is taken. There is no places left. So we take maximum of the dimension of the parcel and the maximum of the height that was permitted by the regulation. Offer the maximum of capacity. So we see here the first level with the starting of the ramp and the 2 cores for the vertical distribution. So this was this building offering the capacity before the occupation by the School of Architecture. Because the School of Architecture, coming inside this building, was able to establish some new platforms, very light construction in steel and wood, that could take the capacity of the height and the resistance of each floor to have a sort of system of mezzanine in order to offer the possibility of the school for its program and its functions. And the auditorium in this part here. And these platforms take this dimension and this occupation on each of the main levels. For example, here the level 1, which is occupied by this mezzanine 3 meters higher than this. Or the level 2, occupied by this mezzanine. By this definition of spaces, we create also inside the system 2 different climates. One in green is the standard climate, the one which it is normally defined by the program, 20 degrees in winter and a good temperature in summer. But also this one, the blue one, which is a sort of intermediate climate, just slightly heated in order to have never under 10 degrees, but most of the time taking the radiation of the sun for a bioclimatic, creating a bioclimatic situation and solar energy situation. And then the project was done with these elements and with this situation also leading to this economy of project. So every time it was possible to create relations with the city to open the situation, we try to make it. For example, here for the auditorium, that has a large door opening in order to create a relation between the audience, the stairs, and the outside, and the river, which is close to the school. The space where we can build a lot of models, which is 1,000 square meters large and 10 meters high, that offers a lot of possibilities. So possibilities of storage to bring some containers inside the school from the street. You see here the existing ground of the city, which is very compacted, that offers this connection with the street, and the possibility for the students, for the professors, to imagine different kind of projects inside without any constraint. But also the possibility to create some concerts. The auditorium with this possibility of opening the door to create the situations between inside and outside. That is very much offered, used by scenography professors. And this extra space, which is a sort of second school, a school where, for example, here, this professor is creating a sort of extra course, extra lesson with a little group of students in a place which is not a standard classroom. And this possibility for the students to use, to move, to have a lot of space, the relation with the outside and with the climate outside or with the sun outside. Possibilities to create a lot of projects linked with the classes. Workshops, sports, places that you can use with tables and move to different places. The transparency and the visions from one space to another space to the city, that is always important to link the different spaces together. Possibility to be alone or to be more, to play music or to create nests between the columns. And the ramp that links all these platforms from one level to the next level, and that's step by step enters in the sky of the city. Possibility to have these very large terraces that can be used for discussions, for meetings, or just for taking the sun. And the ramp going up to the last level, which is this 2,000 square meters totally large agora in the sky of the city of Nantes, offering the possibility of choreography, of music, of making some shootings for the last Clio Renault, that also offers some budgets for the school, or some festival of cinema during 3 months in last summer. So all things that it makes the School of Architecture a sort of space, a platform where plenty of exchanges are possible, and that enrich just the question of architecture and push it to the question of culture about the space regarding the city where it is and the region around the city. At this point, I want to talk about this idea of transformation. Also, the economy, in part of the economy, there is this question to build with, to making do with the existing, with already everything what is already there, the people, the climate, the trees, the floor, the soils, the rose trees, etc. Everything is important to do. And by the way, by using this to do more with less. So it can be in fantastic situations, like here in the area of Bordeaux, close to Atlantic, in Arcachon, where the question was precisely to say, generally when you make a house in these situations, you cut the trees and you erase the sand dune in order to place the houses. And here the question by the clients was how we can do with what exists, how it is possible to install a house and not to destroy the place where the house should be placed. So we add 50 very high pine trees on the plot, a sand dune with a very beautiful shape, and in fact we say we don't want to change and to touch anything of that. So no one tree will be cut and the sand dune will stay exactly as it is. So it is just to think about this precision of installing the structure of steel inside the structure of the forest, to make very precise foundation in order to avoid the roots, to avoid the branches, and to step by step to start to make this situation possible for habitation. Using the reflection of sun on the sea to take it back to the corrugated aluminum under the house in order to make people walking as if the house was not here before. And just to give this addition to the situation, we could say that perhaps 90% of the house was already there before the intervention of the architect, and by adding 10% of material, of steel, of concrete, or corrugated aluminum, this 10% makes the situation possible for living inside and taking the advantage of the great landscape. This transformation is available everywhere in beautiful situations or in situations that are a priori rejected, like these suburbs in France. And in France, since these last 10 years, more than 200,000 flats have been demolished. In the same time, we have so much need of social and affordable housing. So we want to work for very long on the idea of an alternative, or it is possible to do with, instead of demolishing. So the idea it is to add. We have to add to each situation. It's never subtract, always adding, plus. So it means that referring to the case study house program that we really like, is the idea that from this situation, we could go to this situation, and even better to these situations, to give more freedom, to give more floor, to give more possibility of mobility. So it means transform, open, extend, to give more space and more light with the existing, with the people already inside. Like for the Tour Bois-le-Prêtre in Paris, in the periphery of Paris, that was called Alcatraz, with 100 families, and that project was to demolish it and to try to find a place for the inhabitants in plenty of other places in Paris. So inhabitants were totally against the solutions, so it was possible to try to apply our alternative. And to say it is possible, instead of demolishing, to add, in some cases, some new bedrooms, some new winter gardens and balconies, a new kitchen or bedrooms, new elevators, repairing the bathrooms, repairing the electricity, and with the people inside to try to improve the situation. So that makes that from this situation of extreme small dimension, we give more possibility, more freedom, more mobility, more possibility. And by the way, immediately it changed the image of the building from outside. So it means that working for each flat inside transforms the global image from outside. It is exactly the same principle recently in Bordeaux. It is the Cité du Grand Parc, where these buildings were built in the 60s, a very big number of buildings. And we were commissioned to work on these 3 blocks, this one, and the smallest one. So it is 15 level high, nearly 200 meters long, and this one is a little smaller. So in total, it is 530 families. Everything is occupied. There is no one apartment empty, and the people, they want to stay there. So we see precisely that what was done during 50 years, it was perhaps 30 years later, just to paint some figures on the facade, thinking that perhaps life would be better inside. But in fact, it's not possible to work on this kind of refurbishment. In fact, the richness is inside. So it's not a single building that we look from outside. It is 530 different flats with all 30 years of effort, of decoration, of love concerning all the objects that we can apply against the walls. And this is the incredible richness that is not visible from outside. So each time that there is the idea of a possible demolition, we should think of this energy, of this passion, of this time that is spent there all together. And even in difficult situations. Each one is different. The building looks the same from outside, but inside it is totally fantastic number of different situations. So the question was to say, starting from one element, we have 5 like this in the big building, with 3 apartments with a core here, to say how we can extend by 4 meters deep new extension with modular system of 6.4 all over the old facade and creates this extension. So it means that for each apartment, we place this new element, sort of scaffolding that could be definitive and large enough of 4 meters. From this scaffolding, it is possible to open all the windows, to change all windows by new windows, create a winter garden and a balcony in order to change a flat in a villa and create this mobility that we were talking before for all the flats, for all the levels. So this was the situation. And step by step, we change it with the population inside. Because the need of the population was to say, we want to sleep in our bedroom each night. We want to go and wash in our bathroom each night. So this question was to work on all these questions with the people inside, which was also very nice because immediately there were actors nearly of the transformation that was about their flat. So you see here the modular units taken, placed on these columns. They have their own stability, their own foundation. They do not report any load on the existing building. They are just stabilized with the facade of the existing building. So it's an element of 6.4 by 4 meters large, with already the balcony and the handrails that will be the definitive and that assure the protection of the workers in the first time. So then we create these fixations on the old facade with the old windows. We place level on level. About 8 of these modular units was possible to place each day. And then we open the old windows to place new sliding windows, offering the passage from inside to outside, creating the second facade of the winter garden, and then the possibility to have this extra space, this garden, this freedom in addition to the existing. So from another view, we see here the situation as it was before. Here, we cut the old window, and we take some protection about dust and also asbestos, which is partly around the windows in order to protect the workers and the inhabitants inside. So this is for one morning, the habitant a bit afraid and waiting for the opening. And then view from outside, open again, placing the new windows and creating the extension. So it was no more like that. but it becomes like that, with this possibility of fluidity, of mobility, going from one room, turning around the bedrooms, and coming back by the other side. And immediately, what was fantastic, it was to see the inhabitants participating nearly to the works and immediately using and placing new furniture, new functions on their winter garden. And this relation with the climate that is totally different. Instead of these little windows, this possibility of filtering for intimacy or for climate, even if it is winter, if it is summer, if it is morning, if it is cloudy, if it is rainy, etc. All the time, this possibility to, by the inhabitants, to control his relation with outside. So, by the way, working like this from the inside changed the outside. Before, after. Before and after. And also new bathrooms, new electricity, additional elevators that from an existing building that was nearly decided to demolish to establish a new situation for the inhabitants without moving them. The social housing company just went to its bank, because there was no subsidies from the government or from the city. They went to the bank and they say, okay, if I transform the building like that, with this amount of money, I will have perhaps during 15 next years a rent, which stays the same, but this rent will coming, and this should give me the possibility to make this work. And the banker say, yes, no problem, I give you the money to do that. So it's possible. And it was possible also to even to think to different things, because we talk about our admiration for the case study house program. So on top, between the cheminées, on top of the building, it was possible to add 8 new villas with their own garden on top of the situation, to create 8 more flats in the program that you can see here, which immediately also have the benefit of a fantastic view on the city of Bordeaux. So it means 50% of floor in addition, nearly 7 square meters of addition on habitable area, and nearly 50 square meters average extension, considering the winter garden and the balconies. Energy saving is divided by 3, and the cost is 45,000 euro net by dwelling, when, if we consider the first idea, which was the demolition of the existing and rebuilding the existing, the same number, it would have been 150,000 euros, so 3 times more, to do perhaps less surface than the existing. So here we can extend the surface, and in the same time to be 3 times cheaper than the demolition and rebuilding.
And no rent increase.
By the way, in the arrangement, there was a small augmentation of the rent, but in the same time, the taxes and the charges were smaller because the energy saving and the new elevators. So at the end, what has inhabitant to pay stays exactly the same as before. So it is something that it is possible to do. Very quickly, in another situation in the west of France, in Saint-Nazaire, to see the possibility of densification. It is a typical area around the suburbs in France. This tower had 40 flats on 10 levels. And then we start from one situation of all these 4 flats by level with a very, very small bathroom here. That was a small living room, nearly no balcony, to see how it was possible for this small bathroom to take the place of the bedroom here, to have a big window here, then to find a new place for this the bedroom here, new winter garden plus new balcony in order to propose a new flat by extension of the existing. But in the same time, it was possible to densify the situation. So we create these new bedrooms and winter gardens all around the building. But here it was possible to add 2 new wings with 20 more flats here and 20 more flats. So it means to double the number of flats and increasing the dimension of all the flats. So without creating new routes, new streets, new electricity network, etc., on a very small territory around the existing, this possibility to improve the quality of each apartment and in the same time to create new apartments. So working really on densification that is able to transform a suburb in a part of the city. The old building and the extension to propose a new situation. So we think that it's also a question of urban planning. It's also a question of situation. I think what is interesting it is to consider very precisely some situations, to listen, to observe extremely delicately the number of trees, the number of flats, what are the problems, what are the richness, what is interesting, what is missing. Is there something needed? If there is something needed, perhaps what can we do? And what can we add? Or it is possible perhaps to add 5%, 10%, or 20% of new apartments that will create a new value for the situation. So the city is plenty of these situations everywhere. It's just needed to see them very precisely. In Paris, we make the work 1,500 sites of collective housing that creates the possibility of a little improvement of change. So a capacity of transformation and densification of these 1,500 inventoried sites of collective housing. It is a possibility for 450,000 occupied existing dwellings to be transformed, and in the same time to approximately 135,000 new additional dwellings to build. So a new value, a sustainable transformation, and incredible capacity of densification if we look very precisely to the city and to the situations. It means on each situation, to do or not to do. This commission for this plaza in Bordeaux was about the embellishment of this plaza, or it was possible to make a beautiful plaza. So we went there, and we take a lot of time with the people to talk, to listen, to see what is going, what is good, what is not good, etc. And finally, after a lot of also discussions with the municipality, to come finally to the municipality and to say, this is our project. Our project, it is to do nothing. And they agree. It is like this now. Because in fact, it was beautiful. It was charming. It was okay. The people were playing football on the field, and they were sitting on the benches, and there is no reason of embellishment when we take time to look carefully to places. You want
to? Transformation, reuse was also what we have deal with in an old museum in Paris that was abandoned for many years. And that was the situation that we found in Paris in Palais de Tokyo, which is a very nice place, very well located in the city center. And this building was built in, this is the building, was built in 1937 for the last Universal Exhibition in Paris. And this was not a pavilion, but a commission for a museum, which had from the beginning 2 wings. The wings, it was shared between the city of Paris, which is the wing, which is where is the City Museum for Contemporary Art, and the other wing, which was the national wing. And until 1975, there was a National Museum for Contemporary Art. But afterwards, they built another building, a new building in Paris, in the Centre Pompidou, and the collection moved there. The building became, this part of the building became the Museum for Cinema and Photography, until it was decided in the early 90s to make an important refurbishment and put inside what they call Palais du Cinéma. So it means that it was an important and expensive renovation that they organized an international competition. An architect won the competition, and they started the construction during 1 year. So that was the building when it was built in '37. Quite strong and impressive from the outside. And after this 1 year of renovation conducted by this firm of architects, the government decided to stop the project. And it stopped immediately, and the building was left in this situation of nearly a ruin inside, with all partitions demolished, all the networks, all elevators, half of the staircase have been teared down, no more electricity, and just a strange situation of an abandoned building. And it stayed like that during 2 or 3 years with a lot of damage, which happened in the building because of the rain coming inside, the big holes, and so on. And in 1999, the government decided to put inside a very small project of, that was called installation. It means a temporary project for contemporary art center, which was supposed to stay something like 5 years, and was dedicated to the young contemporary artists. And with a very small budget of 3 million to make this installation, while the building is something like 26,000 square meters in the state that you can see. So that was a great challenge, and we applied to the competition. The competition was very fast, and we have just to come back with ideas and a method how to work on this building. And we came back with just a text and a list of works, because we have been totally impressed and fascinated by the architecture, by the fact that this building has been made for a museum, so very, very well done, with a lot of natural light to exhibit artworks. And due to the situation, we didn't find necessary to change the architecture and to add any other architecture, but just to make the minimum works so that this building could open again to exhibition and open again to public. And we did a list of very pragmatic works, starting from the most important, and say that maybe there will not be enough money to make any finishes, but that was enough. And our inspiration for we did that in 2 phases, one in 2000 and the second one in 2012. And our inspiration for this project was the Fun Palace from Cedric Price, which for us is a very interesting project because it talks about the freedom of use of people in a building. That means that instead of creating constraint, the building offers great flexibility and a great facility for the users to be also not only the visitors but also the actors of the building. So we proposed for this huge building. In the first phase, we did only one level, but in fact, it was very successful, and the government decided to make a second phase and to extend the temporary installation for another while. And we proposed to use all the levels for public use from the lower levels, which are connected with the lower street, up to the last level, which is totally under a transparent roof. But all the eras, except a very small era for the logistic access and small storage, all the other levels were open to the public, dedicated to exhibition or public events, like you can see on those sections. So our goal was, instead of the small budget, the first one was 3 million, the second was 12 millions, which is very small for such a big building. But our goal was to make the essential and necessary works so that all this space could be again usable. So that's the section, and in red here the intervention here and there, because it was a project of very exact and precise intervention, not for all the building. And for doing that, it was very important to have a very strict and exact knowledge of the building in order to avoid to make general works, but just to adapt the works to the right place for any place of the building. So this is, for example, an inventory and a report of all the floors and the capacity and the quality of the floors that we had here. So some of them were very weak, some of them were much stronger, and that was very important to focus on the works that we have to do on every place, and again, not to make a general intervention. So we did also at the same, in addition to the plans, a very detailed photography report, just to have always in mind that we could work in a big amount of small situation in order to reopen this building, and not working as considering the building as a whole and make a general intervention. So all the floors, because for example, this floor have been a temporary floor which has been made to consolidate the building after they stopped the work, because they were inside very big holes and the stability of the building was damaged. And we tried to see how we could reuse these temporary floors with some reinforcement, but make them the final and not again starting to demolish everything inside. So we did the same with this very precise inventory and report of the quality of the columns. Again, because we could observe that the columns were very different. Some of them were weak. Some of them were solid enough, but they were not secure enough for the fire. Some of them just needed reinforcement, and some of them didn't need anything. And that was very important to have this inventory to define for every column which was the right intervention in order to be very precise and not to make something which was not useful in the building. And finally, that gave this map of intervention, which was not a very usual plan that normally the architects are giving in the studies, but every red lines is a new intervention. But it was the only way to explain to the workers and the contractors what they had to do. So that was the intervention on the columns. With every color is a different kind of intervention. And doing that, we arrived in the budget which was given. We achieved our intentions, and we arrived to reopen the building to the exhibition and the artists. There was not any finishes, but finally it was not really necessary because the space was interesting enough. And also we provided a number of devices like mobile walls, curtains, and some of the devices that allows to redefine the space at every exhibition according to the curator or to the needs of the artist. But all these spaces are widely open. This is not a place for art where those who are not really educated or informed can enter and can become familiar with the artworks, because the place is very welcoming and very familiar for everyone, and it's possible to stay long, to find the information. See, it's also a living place. It's not only a place for art. So the lower levels have been also used as exhibition space, and they are very convenient for videos or interventions like this old auditorium, which was never opened because there were not security exits. And we just did this new security routes, and it could be open again. And the place which normally was dedicated for storage, but there is no storage because it's not really a museum. So we saw that it was interesting, instead of closing spaces with natural light, to use these dark spaces for video artworks. And all the levels could be open and are still open for the visits and for the exhibition. We created just this big stair to connect all the levels which were not connected, and especially the lower level, which initially were the basements. And the last level, totally under the transparent roof, that we have refurbished, reusing there again all the techniques of greenhouses to create a good climate. This building has no air conditioning, so they have the conditions with variations, but it's totally assumed by the team of and the curators. And the last project, which is also this question of reuse of space and what to do with the existing. And the principle is first to look at places with a very positive eye and to see what we have in hand and what is offered by the place, instead of looking first at all the problems. So that this building was an old former place where in the middle of a big shipyard, and that was the last space where the pieces of boats came to be assembled, and after the boats were moving to the sea. And now this building is alone in the middle of nowhere, because everything has been destroyed around. But this building was kept because in the memory of the inhabitants of the city, it has a special, it's like an iconic building, and the people call it, the inhabitants of the city call it cathedral, because for them it has, this building has a great importance and a great value in the history of the city and the shipyards. So the brief of the competition was to build inside this building a public contemporary art center to shelter a public collection. And we were supposed to put inside this volume 7,000 square meters of new floors to have to create the storage and the exhibition rooms. After the visit of this place, we from the outside and then from inside, we discovered this amazing space, empty space, with a huge volume. All this natural light all around, and the great capacity of, for example, the ground. Because of the activity before, it was possible to build on the ground with a resistance of 5 tons per square meters. So that was already something interesting to keep. So, but after the visit and during the visit, we really were fascinated and touched by this space, and we had very fast the intuition that it was a mistake to fill this space by different floors at different levels. And finally, we decided that instead of filling the building, we will just create a double, a kind of mirror, which was totally new with contemporary construction that would allow to put inside all the program here on this new building in order to let the existing totally empty and to give this high capacity of having great installations or even concerts or any big exhibition that could be possible there, while in the new program this volume was not possible. So the new construction is made with exactly the same shape. Inside we have concrete box, which we have inside all the storage and the exhibition rooms. That's a very good condition for the conservation of the artworks. And we have a second envelope, which creates an intermediate space as exactly the same as in the dwellings, that creates not only a climate but also an extra space for this contemporary art center. So this is the existing hall. One of the biggest new exhibition room, and the last level on top of the concrete box, which is an extra space under the transparent roof with very nice conditions of climate, but also with a nice view all around on the harbor as well as on the sea on the north. And some platforms which allow to see what happened inside. That's it. Thank you very much.
We don't have too much time.
A bit long.
Sorry, we have been.
No. It was a fantastic lecture. We don't have too much time for discussion because Anne and Jean-Philippe need to go to the airport tonight. But we have a little bit. So I just want to start by saying how deeply I admire your work and the rigor and depth of your thinking and the political integrity and the true originality of your thinking. So because you're such philosophical architects, I want to ask you about three big philosophical topics: space, time, and architecture. Earlier, in a conversation earlier today, you talked about your understanding of the connection between space and freedom and space and democracy, and I wonder if you would talk a little bit more, talk about that.
We think this question of inhabiting is fundamental because inhabiting concerns each inhabitant. And we think today the new role of architects, different from the last centuries, it is to think that each inhabitant can be his client, and for the clients, for the inhabitants to say, okay, we should also need an architect to work on. So we start with the house or the flat for each of them. How we can improve, we can change, we can help, we can propose in the history of architecture comfortable, pleasurable situations for all, and necessary, affordable. Mm-hmm. So it's not because the economy is a crucial point that we should lose our ambition of generosity of space. We think that this is a fantastic challenge for all architects, all young architects starting to say, okay, we have an incredible amount of possible clients in the existing city. So this is for us, this challenge, linking with democracy, a new role of architects, how we can help, how we can think and be delicate with the city in an affordable way, but still with a very, very big ambition. So we think it's important, also considering the history of architecture, to follow with this ambition.
On the question of time, it's fascinating to look at your work, and you know, obviously you are reusing the existing city and existing structures, but it's also interesting to look at the specifically at what you create and the juxtaposition of permanent materials, concrete frames, and I mean, you use concrete a lot, and you also use polycarbonate a lot, and so there's the enduring and the, one could say, the ephemeral. But I am curious about how you think about your work in terms of duration, and what you think the lifespan of your own work will be, and whether somebody, you know, the next Lacaton Vassal will come along in 40 years and recreate what you've created.
No, it's a question that today is always a requirement in the project, to think to the life of the buildings and to the life of the materials, but also as in any building, including the old buildings, the materials have different lives. You have the structures that may have a very long life, and we can reuse it, and what we do in the transformation of the housing, many times we find very solid structures that we can start from these new structures to continue something and to extend something. So in our projects, the structures are always, there's no problem with the lasting of the structures, because they are very solid and they can last long. Then there is materials, but again, like in also old building, which has a life which is shorter, the secondary elements. And for example, you talk about polycarbonate, but polycarbonate, in fact, seems to have a bad reputation because it seems to be weak, it seems to be light, but in fact, it's a very resistant material. And it's the life of this material is predicted. So we know that this material has a life of, in terms of transparency, of 15 years. In terms of mechanical resistance, it's very long. It can be 30 years. The houses we have shown, built in 1992, all the greenhouses in polycarbonate, and it has never been changed, and is still very well. So, in fact, there is something also which is also a cultural approach of the materials, that sometimes materials seems poor and some seems to be rich because of their aspects. But in fact, we don't really care about that. We try to use the materials at the right place. And polycarbonate, we also use a lot the glass. But the glass and polycarbonate cannot be placed at the same place in the building. The glass is closing many times the heated zones because it's a double glass and it has a good insulation, a good resistance. And polycarbonate, we use it to close intermediate space because we need a less airproof material to create the best climate, because if the winter garden is airproof on both sides, it doesn't, it's not efficient. It's not a good climate inside. So we have learned that in looking at constructions like greenhouses or industrial construction, where there is no presupposed idea about materials, about the there is no relation between the aesthetic of the material and its solidity. And we have learned about the greenhouses that, in fact, some architecture which can appear very light can be very technological, very clever, very solid. And it's interesting to go out of our general field of knowledge, and because sometimes we are too much enclosed in what makes architecture.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, here as in Europa, we have so many controls, so many regulations that we are, for each material that we employ, we have to give the insurance, the assurance that the proof that it will be solid enough for the time that we need. So it's very difficult to make a building, a temporary building with temporary materials, because it's saying all the matter. It would be much more expensive probably if we would like to make a temporary building than a very definitive building.
I'm going to ask one more question and then turn it over to questions for the audience. So if you have a question, we have mics up in the front. Your vision of the role and the power of the architect is very expansive. And again, in a conversation we had earlier, you said that the architect has the skill to make possible what is impossible, which I think is a beautiful formulation. You also have a very deep commitment to interacting with and understanding not only the needs and desires, but also the capacities and agency of your clients. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more. Jean-Philippe touched on it in answering the first question, but about your vision and understanding of the architect's position and responsibility today. What is architecture, or what should an architect be doing today, and especially vis-a-vis others in the web of relationships that exist to create any sort of built project?
Yesterday there was a student that asked us a question about a bit like that, and we also about the question of fee. When we do nothing or nearly nothing, what is the fee of the architect? And I make the comparison with a doctor. When we feel a little sick, so we go to see the doctor, and we ask the doctor, I feel not very well, and he listens, he looks very carefully, and after that he did in fact, no, it's not a problem. You are okay, come back home, and tomorrow it will be good. And we give the money for the doctor, and we are very happy. So for the architect and for the city, for the problems of the city, it should be the same, I think. It is this, to see in each situation what is the problem, what is missing, what should be improved, what can we change, It is very, very simple gestures in order to see how we can add to the situation. Sometimes it's good, so please don't change. Sometimes there is something to change. Sometimes you have an old building with private residencies that it is very old. The people don't know how to to save energy because it's very old. And perhaps it is possible to, when you say, okay, I can add 10% of new flats for this residency in one place, to find the money, to find the budget in order to improve the quality of the existing ones. So it is to try to find this kind of situations where we can help to the situations. But it needs to be extremely precise. I think you say architect is trying to make possible what seems impossible. I think it is just to take time to listen and to see very, very carefully all the situation and all the richness that it is invisible in situations where we think nothing is possible to do.
So it means that the work and the role of an architect today is not only building. Building and designing is a very small part, finally, of what we have to do now. And we think that maybe we have a role of a kind of transversal intelligence, intelligence in terms of analysis, of understanding the complexity of some questions, understanding the complexity of a situation, and transversal is very important because we have this skill by our education to understand the width of a question, to embrace the question, and to have a kind of diagnostic of a situation, but which is not only technical, because many times a project starts by a technical diagnostic. But nowadays, the technique is not enough. It's not sufficient, because the diagnostic must be as much historical as poetic, as cultural, as social. And I think that the architects have the right education to understand those questions, to put together consultants, people who can give the expertise. We, as architects, I think we really we should gain to present our work like this instead of just designing buildings and reshaping or so. And this is a very, very interesting work to bring, to study, to be able to put together different questions and something which is very complex, to try to find more simple solutions. This is a challenge in itself, and it's for us, it's totally in the role of the architects.
We find that there is a lot of, even in our own work, there is a lot of violence in architecture or in urbanism. And we try to be precise, we try to be delicate, we try to work with kindness. This for us is very important. So when we say we want to add and we never want to take away, so it means that each branch is important, each root is important, each rose tree is important, each family is important, each piece, even 1 square meter of concrete is important. When it is possible not to demolish it or to destroy it or to cut it and to reuse it, also because it's, for us, it seems part of all the words that are actually placed in the discourse of architecture, sustainability, ecology, etc. So when we talk of sustainability, ecology, we have to go really in this direction, not just with the words and not with the acts. The acts have to follow the words.
So it's why what we say about from the inside out is so important, because it means that we have really the feet on ground, the eyes at the right level, and that we see that everywhere there are people using place. And it's not something romantic, but it's just because when you listen carefully to those situations, we change radically our understanding and look at things, and we don't think that the architect should have the power to determine how people should do, how they should live, but just try to give the most interesting and efficient condition of space, so that everyone can do it in the best way.
It struck me tonight, listening to you, that the two of you are in the very best way the true inheritors of the spirit of the generation of '68, and the kind of joyful embrace of life as it is, and the support of life as it can be.
Yeah, we need to be positive and optimist, and we are interested by the complexity of the city. We think that this complexity is not an handicap. This complexity is a richness. We want to see it with a very positive look. And then we want to understand it and to use it. And most of the time, unfortunately, this complexity seems an impossibility for a lot of programmers, politicians, urbanists, and then, because it seems too complex, there is a sort of simplification, a sort we go back to the sort of tabula rasa, and we don't like that. We like to see where are precisely the little problems that if we save this problem, immediately the things are much more easier to work with. And this is this way of working that's really interesting for us.
So you mentioned it, but we think that we have been very lucky to study architecture just after '68 in France, for those who don't know, the kind of French cultural revolution. Mm-hmm. And we have been very lucky because it has opened to us a field of freedom, which is totally incredible. And it gave us, I think, for all our life, a kind of great energy and infinite curiosity, and a very great trust in people and in the life. And I think we are very, very lucky of that.
It's time, actually, I'm sorry, but it's time to put them on the road to the airport. So thank you so much for a wonderful lecture.